We went from talking about how this was a tournament team to firing Mike Rhoades. What the heck happened?
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Seyko, and I'm your host of the show, joined once again by Penn State men's basketball correspondent Zane Brancefield over on the other side. So, Zane, it's a freezing cold take at this point. The initial reaction, and it wasn't just us. There were college basketball analysts that were saying, watch out for Penn State. This is a team that could make some noise in March Madness. Well, that is completely a foregone conclusion that is not going to happen. But now it's taken a completely, it's gone off course, where now there are fans that are speculating, people that are speculating if Mike Rhoades should be fired here. Zane, I can't go that far. So I don't have a hot take here. My hot take is that he should not be fired. He absolutely needs more time. But this is why we're going to explain the Penn State men's basketball free fall, because part of it is on the coaching staff. Part of it's just bad luck. Puff Johnson's hurt. Whatever anybody says, Ace Baldwin's not himself. And I'm going to chalk that up to injury, because how does a player going into his, fifth? And maybe I'm mistaken, sixth year of college basketball, at least his fifth. How does he take a step backwards? We know that he was dealing with multiple ailments per Coach Rhoades. So, and then Yannick Conan-Niederhauser gets banged up here before this game against Minnesota. So coaching not being able to close out in close games, and then just the injury bug.
Yeah, so you can't blame all this on Mike Rhoades. First of all, he's new to the program. It's his second year. The fact that a few years ago, Micah Shrewsbury was able to go to March Madness in his second year, that's not very likely. It doesn't happen in most cases. So you can't put Mike Rhoades, comparing him to that. A lot of things went into place for that. Mike Rhoades also, it's not necessarily completely a lack of talent, as you mentioned, injuries, and also just a matter of execution too. It doesn't matter really if your players aren't executing, and a lot of those games were within 5 points of each other, so you can't really say that either. So sure, if Penn State had guys that 5-star recruits such as Cooper Flagg at Duke, you could make, and Penn State was losing, then you could say, okay, maybe it's the coaching staff. But Penn State really doesn't have any of those top elite level talents yet.
So you're saying that they don't have enough?
That's exactly what I'm saying. I don't think Penn State has enough players. You could say the highest rated guy on the team is Miles Goodman, who's coming off of
going off of recruiting rankings. I mean, but Ace Baldwin was supposed to be one of the best. He's on all these award lists now. He had high expectations. Mike Rhoades said at the beginning of the season, this is the best version of Ace Baldwin that I've ever seen. And when you watch the games, it looks like the Monstars stole a portion of his talent. I'm not trying to criticize, because I know that he's not 100%. You don't just casually take a step backwards. He's saying Ace Baldwin put all this time in the gymnasium. He was getting better. I've coached him his entire collegiate career. If anybody should know what the best version of Ace Baldwin looks like, it is Mike Rhoades. So for Ace Baldwin to make mistakes that are just completely out of this world, I really think it just boils down because his defense isn't the same caliber. He's forced to shoot the ball as opposed to driving in. I know that Penn State men's basketball is never going to hand out an injury report and go into detail of what everybody's dealing with, because they're not obligated to. But saying if they were, I don't think that Ace Baldwin is even close to 100% healthy.
I agree. You can only speculate so much, so I don't want to go into what we think's wrong with Baldwin, but he definitely doesn't look himself. But there's some other things that aren't just injury related. He's turning the ball over a lot, which you wouldn't think he'd be doing that as a veteran player.
Yeah.
And there's no excuse for that, for him to be turning the ball over as much as he does, because I think he's over 2-3 turnovers a game, which most guys in the Big Ten, even point guards like Braden Smith, are under 2. And so, sure, you could say he's banged up. That would go into him playing defense and his scoring ability, but like I said, he's having a lot of turnovers. So I would say a lot of it's coming down to just some sloppy plays, trying to do a little too much in that aspect, and that might come from missing some other key players around him, such as Puff Johnson. But
Puff Johnson's a big key here. I did not. I did not realize, so forgive me in this regard to the Penn State basketball fan base, that I didn't realize how valuable Puff Johnson was. Yes, I knew that he was good and you want him in the starting lineup. He's one of the better players on this team. But this is when things started to really get out of control, is that I think if you have Puff Johnson in the lineup and have him fully healthy, they win a majority of these games where they lose by just a couple of baskets.
And the reality is they don't have Puff Johnson and they lost these games. And
Yeah.
they have to regroup next year because they're losing quite a bit of guys. You lose Zach Hicks, Ace Baldwin Jr., Nick Kern Jr., DeMarco Dunn, Puff Johnson. So a lot of portal is going to have to be used because I think Penn State has 3 recruits coming in. And so then Mike Rhoades said he'll have to go to the portal. And so Penn State's going to have to start regrouping. And I think that time starts now. Like, Mike Rhoades won't say, oh, we're just going to give up on the season, because he said just the other day against Ohio State that people were like, why didn't you pull your starters with like 2-3 minutes left? And he said, well, I still thought we had a chance to win, and I don't want to just surrender and lose. So Mike Rhoades isn't going to say, well, I'm just going to give up on the season and all hope is lost. But the reality is, if you look outside, Penn State's probably not going to make the Big Ten tournament because
that's bad.
Everyone with the expanded Big Ten, the bottom 3 teams don't make the Big Ten tournament. And Penn State right now is in that second to last spot. And so it's not looking great for the Nittany Lions, and Penn State's going to need a miracle run if they're going to somehow make it into the Big Ten tournament. The NIT is probably out of the question as well. And that's why I say Penn State probably needs to look forward next season and maybe start having guys like Ace Baldwin Jr. mentoring the younger guys, such as like Dominic Smith and Javin Carter, and Yannick Niederhauser pulling up Kachi Enza and Miles Goodman as well.
I mean, all those guys will be back, right? This team becomes Freddie DeLeon's, Yannick Niederhauser, right? Those become the faces of the team. Miles Goodman, in a way, I think this is a chance for him to mature and be a more involved player, because he has to be. He has to be. Zane, something else that I want to point out before we go to break is that this team just doesn't seem to have the chemistry it did a season ago. Issues with chemistry? Yes, we're going to talk about that more on the other side of this break. And today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Looking for tickets to your next big event? Whether it's a concert, comedy show, or a sporting event, finding the right ticket at the right price, it can be a headache, but with Gametime Picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. Gametime Picks, the app does all the hard work for you, or gametime.co on your browser. It curates the best deals so you don't have to waste time searching through endless amounts of tickets. You can use the Gametime Picks and you'll love it. The curated deals make it super simple. You'll find great tickets at a great price. No more sifting through thousands of endless options. And then you'll have the super deal to get those prime seats. You won't believe the value. It's going to feel like a steal. And then the game changer feature, seat views. Yes, you have a point of view. You get to see what your point of view looks like before you buy the ticket. So you'll know exactly what you're looking at from a concert, a sporting event, especially if you've never been to that arena or venue before. The best part, you're covered with Gametime's lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they'll refund you 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up. Are you ready to make your next event even better? Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that is code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Which is so odd to me, and that's why it goes back to coaching. So I'm willing to give Mike Rhoades this mulligan and say that, look, injuries did you no favors, because when you look at when this team was at full strength, what they did to a top Purdue team that very well should make the Sweet 16. Okay, and that's why there was that chatter like, oh, you did this? Nick Kern was coming off of the bench. And that's been such a big difference of now him being, and I'm not saying because he's in the starting lineup, but it took away your depth. It took away your strategy and what you ultimately wanted to do. And this is a team that tries to drive to the basket. And now I feel like they're forced to become a shooting type of team when they are not. They don't have a lot of shooters. This is a team that wants to get to the basket and then play inside out basketball where they drive to the basket, draw the double team, either dump it off to Conan Niederhauser or dish it outside to Zach Hicks. And they can't do that. So, and that's the impact of Puff Johnson's injury. Let me go back to chemistry though. when it has come down to, because Penn State, without Puff Johnson, was winning these games. They were leading, and in the final seconds, they absolutely combust. And that's on coaching too, because yes, they are a veteran team, but it felt like Penn State just had no idea what they were doing. They had completely forgotten how to play some semblance of team basketball together in the final 2 minutes. The difference here is that Freddie DeLeon and Conan Niederhauser were not working together with Baldwin, Zach Hicks, DeMarco Dunn, or any of them a season ago. How did the chemistry go backwards, Zane, when the nucleus, the core was here from this past season, and then you added in a couple complementary players that were supposed to take you a step forward, and somehow they've gone backwards?
So I think the big thing there is, like you said, you're losing your guys. Puff Johnson, I think, is like the ultimate glue guy in college basketball. He keeps those guys together. But you mentioned, like, we keep your core. Like, you can say Zach Hicks, Nick Kern Jr., Ace Baldwin Jr. Those guys, I would still argue, have good chemistry, the three of them together. DeMarco Dunn, he comes off the bench, and he has a little bit of chemistry with those guys, but he doesn't play all the time, and he hasn't played a ton of minutes every game. So you mentioned Freddie DeLeon the fifth and Yannick Conan Niederhauser. Well, like, honestly, if you watch the game, they kind of do their own thing to an extent. Like, sure, Yannick Conan Niederhauser is getting dishes and he's like slamming the ball down, so that's not him doing his own thing. But if you watch the way Mike Rhoades handles Freddie DeLeon, it's a little interesting to watch, because against Ohio State, DeLeon didn't start the second half, and he didn't come in until like 7 minutes left in that second half of the game. So you wonder then, what is the reason for putting DeMarco Dunn in there? And I think the big thing is chemistry there. If you watch DeLeon play, and his scoring has gotten better, he can dish out the ball a little bit, but I just feel like he's still in that mindset of like him first. And I know Mike Rhoades like says he's like, oh, Freddie's starting to get the understanding of what we tell him, like, buy into what Penn State's doing, and then you'll produce out of that. Well, if Freddie DeLeon were to transfer in the offseason, I wouldn't be surprised, because I don't think he really fits the mold. I think he's a great basketball player. I think Penn State needs to do everything they can to keep him. But the reality is, I don't know if he fits that Mike Rhoades mold. Ace Baldwin Jr. is so good for Mike Rhoades and what he's trying to do, because he's a pass-first guard. Baldwin Jr., like, he's averaging around 8 assists a game this season. You need guys like that. Now, DeLeon's a 6'5" guard who should be getting more than like 2.5 assists a game. And he's not doing that. And I just, like, sure, he's good defensively. I just don't think he's buying into that team aspect. He's not looking to pass first. Like, I'm not saying he shoots a billion shots a game, because he doesn't shoot a ton of shots, but it's just kind of a different element. And I just don't think Penn State plays as a team. As you said, chemistry is the word, but I just think there's more that Penn State can do as far as a team itself. Like, you can play. Penn State hasn't really run like their press this season like they did last year, and I wonder if that's a chemistry thing as well.
I think part of that has to do with more personnel, right? Because Conan Niederhauser is a 7-foot center. It's tough to run him up and down the floor when you don't have the depth anymore. They can't play small ball. They can't be strategic, right? Conan Niederhauser was playing about 20 to 20, the max, 25 minutes. They were going to try to keep him around 20 minutes when you were able to work in a Nick Kern Jr. off the bench. And now you can't do that. You can't be strategic. So bottom line, this Penn State team is just not that deep. They have the talent, they have the veterans, and I think if everything in a perfect world were to mesh together, but this isn't a perfect world, as we all know, that you have to overcome your circumstances, and they couldn't. One player gets hurt, and the star player gets slightly banged up, and everything's gone off the rails, and there's now just it's a fringe debate. Like I said, I am not in favor of firing Mike Rhoades. I think this team's recruiting well. I like that Joe Crispin's on staff. He is a Pennsylvania guy. He says that this is his destination job. So I don't see him using this as a stepping stone. To circle it back with what we started this conversation with, you don't fire Mike Rhoades, but if it doesn't get better going into next season, because somehow I feel like last year's team, after they moved on from Kanye Clary, would beat this year's team in its current state. And I think that really is saying something when this was supposed to be a tournament team, but like Ace Baldwin's not healthy. Puff Johnson's out for an extended period of time. Maybe they get him back sooner rather than later. I don't know what the extent of his injury is, so I can't sit here and declare this is what they should do, right? We don't know. So Zane, to wrap up the conversation, can they save this season? And when you look at the schedule, they go on the road to California, which is not ideal, especially with coming off of a 4-game losing streak. You have a win sandwiched in there against a banged up Rutgers team, and then another 4-game losing streak before that. So you've lost, 8 of your last 9. Then you got to fly out and face a talented UCLA team, a talented USC team that I thought Penn State would be better than. That's not the case. In my opinion, they're still better than Washington. They are better than Nebraska. Is that when Puff Johnson returns in the middle of February? Maybe. Let's just say this. I will count them out against UCLA. I want to give them maybe a puncher's chance against USC. But Washington, Nebraska, Minnesota again? Minnesota's not a really good team. Penn State was leading at one point in time, and then go figure, they couldn't hold on to the lead. And then when they finished up against Indiana, Maryland, and Wisconsin, okay, that's when I say, you know what, I don't know how much of a chance they have there. But there are still a handful of winnable games that if you win the ones that you're supposed to, they can at least sneak into the Big Ten tournament, right? Yes, can Penn State men's basketball actually do it and come from behind to get back into the Big Ten tournament? Well, we'll tell you more about it coming up here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Today's show is also brought to you by PrizePicks. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports with over 10 million members and billions in awarded winnings. PrizePicks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. Here's how it all works. You simply pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. PrizePicks even has a free pick for the big game, where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw for 1 yard to win. Pair that with one more correct pick, and you're cashing out. And if you can look across the slate and see other players that are available. Do you think Travis Kelce's going to have more or less than on his receiving yards? Or how about the other quarterback, Jalen Hurts? Do you think he'll have more or less on his passing yards? And the best part, fast, safe withdrawals. When you win, your cash is in your account in as little as 15 minutes. Check out the promos tab to tail any of the super sweet Millie Winners big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That is code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That is PrizePicks. PrizePicks, run your game. I think I'm going to hold out a last bit of optimism that Puff Johnson returns with the right amount of time left, and they are able to do something to not make the season a total embarrassment.
Well, if you're taking the optimistic side, I'll take the more realistic side of things. And
oh boy, so I'm not even being realistic. Oh no.
I just don't know if Penn State can beat. I think they beat Washington. UCLA, USC, I don't think they come close. And Minnesota maybe is another win there. So if you want to go saving the season, what is saving the season? I think
make the Big Ten tournament.
Making the Big Ten tournament. It's going to be close. I think the Nittany Lions could do it
because I want to see this team at full strength again. I want to see this team with the rotation that was against Purdue. If they can get that once again, I say rest Ace Baldwin, rest him or limit his minutes, because I'm not saying forfeit and try not to win, but you got to do something because the formula against Purdue worked. Why did it work? Because Penn State was able to execute the game plan that they wanted to. Conan Niederhauser is now banged up as well. So Penn State really doesn't have an option here of let's get our guys healthy and try to position ourselves to go on a hot streak to end the season, sneak into the Big Ten tournament, and then just mess things up. Because you got nothing to lose, right? Everybody's counting you out. Nobody's going to respect you if you get into the Big Ten tournament and sneak in. Then you can make some noise. So, I mean, I'm not a basketball coach, but just from logically speaking, Ace Baldwin's not right. Puff Johnson's obviously out. Conan Niederhauser is now on the injury report. If I'm Penn State and in games against UCLA and USC where I know my chances are not as good, you should probably hedge your bets, metaphorically speaking here. hedge your efforts and try to go long term to salvage the season and get Ace Baldwin closer to 100%. Get Conan Niederhauser, and then with a bit of luck, Puff Johnson returns to the lineup as well.
So if we're saying making Big Ten tournament is saving the season, I think Penn State could do that. If you look at the standings, they're currently
how many games do they have to win?
Yeah, so they're 3-9, and they're
only one game back, right? Minnesota, they can at least get the tiebreaker there. Northwestern, they would hold the tiebreaker against Northwestern. A win over Nebraska would win them a tiebreaker. They split with Rutgers. So this is by no means out of the question. It's not like they have 0 wins in Big Ten conference play. And no, they actually have, go figure, the opponents that they need to beat on their schedule to do just that. Yeah. So we'll see.
Yeah, they could win 2 or 3 of their remaining games and probably squeak into the Big Ten tournament.
All right.
And like you said, no one's going to respect them. Maybe they'll do what Shrewsbury squad did a couple years ago, make a miracle run. Because at that point, maybe Ace is healthy, maybe Puff is healthy. Yannick's day-to-day right now with what was said to be a sprained ankle, so he could be back anytime here. In
Miles Goodman time. Let him learn. I'm all for it. That was the top-rated recruit. Right. And it goes back to Rhodes recruiting, how well he is. Class of 2024 was great. Class of 2025 is shaping up very well. And the class of 2026, they are at least off to a good start. So it's not like Mike Rhoades isn't doing the right things, but the results are obviously not there in year 2 at this point in time. It's there. I just think it's been a lot of unlucky breaks. And then it's demoralizing when you stack close loss after close loss after close loss on top of each other. Even a veteran team is going to fall victim to that.
Absolutely. But I think the key thing here is Mike Rhoades is still trending the right direction. People are disappointed. They're like, well, he hyped up the season. He made a big deal about return to the rec, and they fell short. But the reality is they are still in the right direction. Penn State is not a winning basketball program. And so I think you have to take how good can Penn State men's basketball be with a grain of salt. And so I think even if Mike Rhoades ends up going here to March Madness and once or twice in the next 5-ish years, I think that's pretty good for Penn State men's basketball. Obviously, he wants to make it more than that, but he's done well with what he's done so far. It's his second year in the program. He's trying to make a winning program. That's not a temporary winning program, kind of like Shrewsbury had success in 2 years. Mike Rhoades is trying to have long-term success. And so I think we mentioned recruiting. Recruiting's been good. He's had top guys play under him. He could say, I coached top guys like Ace Baldwin Jr. So he can pitch that to recruits. Like I said, he's trying to make a long-term program here. You said it's his destination job. Joe Crispin's on staff. Mike Rhoades has all the right pieces. The only thing left to do is just win. And I think he's in the right direction with that. And so you got to give the guy a little bit of a break because it is year 2. And it's a program that really didn't have much to start with at the very beginning. And it's just now starting to get funding from Pat Kraft and the board. And they're just now starting to really get support from their fans as well. So I think I still think Mike Rhoades is the guy. If you talk to me in a couple years and he's still not winning, that's a different story. But as of right now, Mike Rhoades is the guy. And I think Penn State fans need to be excited for what he's building and not what he currently has.
Yeah, I'm not ready to sell out on Mike Rhoades. Gosh, Zane, you just made me remember of the reported Zoom call where Micah Shrewsbury, it was a Penn State men's basketball call, and this is where I want to finish things up, but I can't help but not bring it up, where Micah Shrewsbury was on a Zoom call, and they were meeting about NIL funding and everything else and how they were going to execute the plan, and somebody said, well, what about our other varsity sports? I was just like, oh man, so those days are over. There is, like you said, there's an initiative, there's a support for Penn State men's basketball that was not necessarily there the first go around, or the last few go arounds, I should say. Hey, that's where we'll wrap this one up here on Locked On Nittany Lions. He is Zane Brancefield, a correspondent for Penn State men's basketball coverage. You can check out his work down in the description. We'll have more conversations around Mike Rhoades and Penn State basketball as the season continues to unfold. Zane, thanks so much for the time again to analyze what what the Nittany Lions are up to. And again, thank you so much for checking out this episode of Locked On Nittany Lions. Thank you for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. For your second listen and watch, check out Locked On Big Ten with host Craig Sheeman. Craig puts the Big Ten first when everybody else seems to overlook it, and with football, that was definitely the case. You can find Locked On Big Ten available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest digest around all 18 teams in the conference. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network with your team every day.